are some of the most disturbing TikTok families, and as the video goes on, the people behind them will go from creepy individuals to terrifying monsters. It's May of 2023. A new TikTok account called Dad and Daughter Dream Team pops up, showing a father and daughter duo doing TikTok trends together. At first glance, it looked like a typical attempt at becoming influencers. But as viewers continued watching their videos, it became increasingly clear that something wasn't right. The father, a man in his 40s named Patrick, and his 20-year-old daughter Sarah began to appear less like a typical father-daughter pair, as their behavior became questionable. They would stand a little too close to each other. His hands often lingered on her neck or waist, and when they looked at each other during romantic dance songs, it resembled something out of a romance movie rather than a family moment. And as more videos came out, viewers began noticing changes in Sarah. She often looked exhausted, with dark, heavy bags under her eyes. But sometimes later in 2023, they would upload a video that sent online suspicion about their dynamic into a completely new level. In their living room, Patrick could be seen dropping to one knee and opening a ring box, while Sarah gasped in apparent shock. And to anyone scrolling past, this scene looks like a marriage proposal, up until Patrick began to speak. He then slides the ring onto her finger and tells her that it stays there until her husband replaces it. And this clip quickly gains attention online, though not in the way they seem to expect. The comment section was flooded with people calling it creepy and expressing their concerns. But every time people pointed out how uncomfortable their dynamic was, they would post a video angrily addressing the haters and of course the trolls, insisting they're just a close family and that everyone else was the problem.
Please, stop talking about me like I'm not even here, like I don't exist. I see all the comments. If I respond to a comment that you made about me, as me, it's obviously me.
But as they continued to post, online communities began to look deeper, checking past uploads and finding anything that might explain their behavior. And this is when viewers began noticing that Sarah's mother was never present. Patrick appeared in every video, filming, initiating the overly intimate interactions viewers were already uncomfortable with, and taking on a role that comes across more like a partner than a parent. But eventually, they would do a mom reveal, introducing her as Teresa.
Hello everyone, so we've been getting a lot of questions like this. Where's mom? Mom reveal. Here she is. This is my mother. Her and my dad have been married for 22 years. They are very happy. She just doesn't like appearing on camera very often.
Hi guys. Yeah, I don't like being in front of cameras, but I'm behind the camera. I'm with them all the time. I'm supporting them, and I have a part in it too. So yeah, you finally got to see me, and here I am.
But that still didn't stop the allegations of inappropriate relationships between Patrick and his daughter, forcing Teresa to make a video defending her family. However, in this video, Teresa appeared to be reading from a script as she told the internet to back off. Her speaking intonation also sounded forced, and her expressions remained tense throughout. Viewers also noticed that while Sarah wore the ring given to him by Patrick in later videos, her mother didn't seem to have a wedding band on. But as bad as the situation seemed at this point, it was only about to get worse. In late of 2024, Sarah would post a video of herself dancing to a song by an artist named Ariella Brickman, who she claimed to have discovered on Spotify and became obsessed with. But viewers researching the artist noticed that the music appears AI generated, and that the profile showed a digitally created woman who suspiciously resembled Sarah herself. Fans would also trace Ariella to an Instagram account and a fan view profile, an adult website that features AI generated models. The account presented Ariella not only as a singer, but also as an AI model selling explicit content. The shocking part though was that further investigation would reveal that the recovery email for both accounts was registered to Patrick. But when Patrick was actually confronted, he simply denied it, saying that he doesn't even know how to use this AI thing. But the situation escalated even further. In October of 2025, when a TikToker named Hannah, who's been covering the case throughout, convinced Patrick to agree to a live interview. She told him that if he just admits to the AI account, the public will respect his honesty and move on. And taking her advice, Patrick actually admitted to owning this AI account during the live stream.
You know what? Honestly, yeah, I created the Ariel account.
But Patrick framed the account as a business venture, a way to make money using AI trends. And he also admitted running the Instagram account and posting the music, but stopped short of the other discoveries, insisting he had no involvement in them. He also denied having anything to do with a profile on a site called Literotica. For context, Literotica is a website that hosts user-submitted adult stories, and investigators found an account called Babe for Dad on the platform that was linked to Patrick's known email addresses, and the stories on the account went beyond generic adult content. They were graphic, disturbing stories about a father and his daughter, and it featured a young woman named Ariella, who's in a secret intimate relationship with her father. And the author himself, so Patrick, even tried to justify it in the text, writing bizarre defenses like, "Even living in Rhode Island where intimate relations between family members is legal, it is still frowned upon. I really don't understand why." On the live stream, Patrick looked into the camera and insisted, "I did not create that. That is disgusting. I would never write that." But Sarah sat beside him, nodding and defending his statements. This case would drag on until November of 2025, when Hannah dropped a bombshell on TikTok by releasing screenshots of her private messages with Patrick. And in the messages, Patrick actually dropped the act and wrote, "Of course it does. So yes, I wrote that story. This is the only story like that I've ever written. It was complete fiction and it was hard for me to even write it. But I was being stupid trying to get traction for the whole AI account." Patrick then attempted to justify it by pointing out that the most top read stories on Literotica are from that category, before he then ends the message by saying, "There, I said it. Now you know everything that we've lied about." But then the situation took an unexpected turn. Right after posting these screenshots, Hannah actually deactivated her account and then vanished, and viewers were simply left without an explanation for her sudden disappearance. And even now, it's still unclear whether Patrick threatened legal action or if she decided that she'd finished covering the story and stepped away. Despite the confessions, leaks, and mounting evidence, Patrick and Sarah are still together till today, and even now they continue to present themselves as a normal family. However, Patrick's digital footprint, of course, remains permanent. Many creators facing similar allegations often step back from the public, but for this next influencer, walking away wasn't an option.
What you need to know is that no law enforcement agencies I conferred with, including the FBI, have found any proof that my daughter's likeness appears on inappropriate websites.
Jacqueline Paul is a family TikToker who first started posting videos of her infant daughter, Ren Eleanor, back in 2019, not knowing that she was about to become one of the most famous babies on the internet with over 17 million followers. At first, everything appeared ordinary, as Jacqueline filmed Ren's everyday moments, presenting their early years as in us against the world journey. She raised Ren on her own, with the father being absent, doing what she could to keep their small world steady. On the account, she would share bath routines, light skits, and outfit videos, framing the account as a way to preserve memories and potentially build something for Ren's future if the page continues to grow. And as the page did continue to gain traction, it grew fast. By the time Ren was only a toddler, her videos were reaching numbers most Hollywood celebrities would envy, with the account climbing past 16 million followers. And as the audience expanded and the visibility of the page increased, the content slowly began to shift. At first, the changes were small, but over time, the videos soon shifted from simple clips of a child playing with toys to content that seemed tailored toward a different kind of audience. On TikTok, there are two main forms of engagement: likes and saves. And most viral videos rack up likes and sometimes shares. But on Ren's page, the save number began to stand out. Most of her everyday videos, whether she's playing with blocks, walking around, or just sitting on the floor, typically received between 2,000 and 5,000 saves. But when Jacqueline uploaded a video of Ren eating a pickle, the save count would jump to over 376,000. And this spike raised concern from fans, since content of this kind usually doesn't generate that amount of private saves, considering that the feature save is there so the user can watch it at a later point again. But despite the concern of the fans, the video remained online, and over time, similar posts would actually keep appearing on the page. One time, she posted a video of Ren eating a corn dog, and this one too reached tens of thousands of saves. And another clip where she struggles to finish a popsicle climbed into the hundreds of thousands. As these posts continued, Jacqueline also began filming from particular angles and choosing foods that are messy or shaped in ways that draw unusual attention. In one video, Jacqueline holds out cash in one hand and a lollipop in the other, asking Ren which one she wants. She then repeats the question and waits for her daughter to say the word "sucker" several times before handing it to her. The choices in these videos begin to look really intentional, as if Jacqueline was selecting props and moments to draw higher engagement for a particular kind of group. In one clip, Jacqueline hands her daughter a razor and a tampon. Ren then responds by placing the razor against her leg and moving the tampon around in her hand. And as usual, this video received a significant amount of engagement. And if there was any uncertainty about who was engaging with this content, the comment section would make it unmistakable, as some users would leave remarks like, "Too cute to be taken advantage of. Hey God, it's me again. Wait until she hits her teens." And these comments weren't hidden. They sat openly under videos featuring a small human. And the attention didn't stay on Jacqueline's page alone. When you search for Ren's name on Instagram, you will find entire fan accounts dedicated to her. And when users looked into who operated them, they would often discover the same pattern. The accounts were managed by adult men who take the content Jacqueline posts, repost it, and form communities centered around their interests in this particular person. And Jacqueline, of course, saw the comments and the save counts, yet she continued posting. And by 2022, the concern from viewers had reached a turning point, as many would urge her to take the account down in order to protect her daughter. And it was at this stage that Jacqueline finally responded with a video saying that she was distressed by what she called false rumors, explaining that she was just a single mother trying to provide for a child.
The past few months have been incredibly distressing, and I've learned a lot. What started out as a hobby to make a digital scrapbook for my daughter Ren grew into an interesting role for me as a single stay-at-home mom. Ren is my #1 priority, and her upbringing and safety are my top job 24 hours a day. This account has allowed me to provide for my daughter and to set aside money for her future.
In the same response, she presented a view of her TikTok's analytics, which showed that 76.8% of her followers were actually female. However, when you apply their percentage to an account with 15 million followers, the remaining portion still accounts for more than 4 million men. And that number is larger than the population of Los Angeles, for example. Now, as concerns continued to spread, rumors began circulating online, claiming that Ren's photos and videos were appearing on inappropriate websites, alarming a lot of parents who were already worried about how her content was being used. Now, in order to get the people off her back, she came out to claim that she'd spoken with the FBI, and according to her, the federal agent assured her that there was no evidence of her daughter's images appearing on inappropriate websites. However, she never provided documentation to support the statement. There wasn't a case number, no email, and no confirmation from the authorities. And this was when fans really began to scrutinize scrutinize her claims. Tracy Walder, a former CIA operative and FBI special agent, saw this claim and responded publicly. She claimed that the FBI doesn't just casually meet with TikTok creators to give informal assurances about their accounts, and that their work focuses on large-scale distribution networks rather than individual content creators. And so Tracy's response raised serious doubts about Jacqueline's statement. But while the backlash that followed in 2022 was expected to prompt a change in how the account was being run, or at least lead to more caution, instead it was business as usual. And by 2024, the account would grow even more worrisome. During this period, TikTok suddenly stopped paying creators for short videos, and speculation began to circulate online as users claimed that Jacqueline may be responding to private requests from followers who wanted Ren to repeat certain phrases that can be interpreted in concerning ways, once taken out of context. One example frequently mentioned is Ren saying, "I swallowed it." If these theories are accurate, it would mean that the content didn't shift by accident. Instead, Jacqueline was actively fulfilling requests from viewers with inappropriate motives. But Jacqueline's day of reckoning was actually closer than she realized. In late 2024, Dr. Leslie, a forensic psychologist, released a video outlining the risks associated with Ren's content, explaining how individuals with harmful intentions may misuse these images. But when Jacqueline saw the video, her response was immediate. Instead of acknowledging the concerns, she went on the defensive. Because not long after, Dr. Leslie shared a private email she received, one that many viewers quickly speculated came from Jacqueline, though this was never confirmed. The message begins with praise, saying that she's very impressed with everything Leslie had accomplished, but the tone quickly shifts, accusing her of creating a hate storm and putting their family at risk. The sender also acknowledged that a minority of followers may have concerning intentions, but argues that the majority actually didn't. And Dr. Leslie simply responded by saying, "Even if you think there might be one, you're still enabling this behavior and profiting from it." At the moment, Ren's account remains online, although all previous uploads have been removed. There hasn't been a public update on Ren herself, and while she faces a potential threat from thousands of strangers online, our next victim was living with the danger that came inside their own home.
There was only his fingerprints. None of her fingerprints were on the bag or the tape. How would she put a bag over her head with no fingerprints?
It's the morning of July 28, 2023 in Antioch, Tennessee. To the outside world, 29-year-old April Holtz appeared to have a full and successful life. Those who knew her described her as an outgoing introvert and someone who enjoyed lighting up a room, but also valued quiet evenings spent reading and journaling. And outside of her personal life, she built a successful lash studio, raised 2 young children, and steadily grew a TikTok following that would surpass 200,000 users. On that Friday morning, her routine begins as it always does, with a cup of coffee and a few quiet minutes spent writing in her journal. During this time, she messaged her mother, Jamie, to cancel the plans to see the Barbie movie that day, since her husband Donovan was going to work. But as the hours passed, things started to take an unexpected turn. By that afternoon, April had been rushed to the hospital, and Donovan told paramedics that he found her unresponsive in the shower, barely breathing. Shortly afterwards, Jamie arrived at the hospital, and as soon as Donovan saw her, he handed her April's phone and appeared to be trying to hide something. But before police were actually able to secure April's apartment, Donovan left the hospital and returned to the home twice, while April was still fighting for her life. And what makes this even more suspicious was that he never provided any explanation for these trips to April's mother. But once the spawners actually assessed the scene of the actual incident, the bathroom, it became clear that it wasn't a typical medical emergency. They found a black plastic trash bag secured tightly with duct tape there, something that of course could be used to take somebody's life if put on their head. And so the police began to suspect that there was foul play involved. Now when they questioned Donovan, he gave a conflicting story, claiming that April had actually done this to herself. But despite the sketchy nature of this claim, the police took Donovan's word at face value. Now unfortunately, on July 31st, after 3 days on life support, April succumbed to her injuries. Based on the evidence presented, the authorities ruled it as a self-inflicted death. And shockingly, the detail about the plastic bag that was most likely put over her head wasn't even disclosed to the family for hours, and the case was closed before it even properly began. But April's mother wasn't buying it. Jamie claimed that she was familiar with her daughter's life and beliefs, including her commitment to her children and her strong faith, so it simply didn't make sense that she would check herself out of this earth. And by taking a look at the family's TikTok account, it started to make sense why Jamie was suspicious. On TikTok, the couple portrayed themselves as best friends who'd overcome a period of separation to rebuild their marriage into something stronger. But behind the scenes, the story was very different. Throughout this 7-year relationship, Donovan had a very controlling behavior, which took different forms. When April, for example, tried to leave, he would sleep in his car outside her apartment to keep tabs on her. And during the periods when they were back together, his control shifted into their finances, repeatedly claiming their bills were paid when they weren't, forcing April to fix the fallout. There had been past moments when April considered ending the marriage, but in July of 2023, she reached a breaking point and told her mother that she finally planned to file for divorce, claiming that this time the decision was truly final. At this point, she began preparing for a different future that didn't include Donovan. Somewhere along the line, Donovan noticed he was losing control, but unlike their previous separations, April wasn't backing down this time. So just 1 week before that Friday morning, he secretly pawned her wedding ring. In the days that followed, April moved forward with her plans to leave, and Donovan grew tense. And then, by the morning of July 28th, events had escalated to the point that hours later, April was fighting for her life. After piecing together these clues, Jamie decided to conduct her own investigation, requesting the full case file including the autopsy report and police notes, refusing to let her daughter become just another lost case. It took months of intense analysis, but the autopsy report eventually confirmed Jamie's fears. The medical examiner revealed that April's body showed bruising on the neck, broken blood vessels in her eyes, petechial hemorrhaging, which is a sign of strangulation, and bruises on her ankles and thighs. These injuries were quickly to be found somehow inconsistent with a self-inflicted death, and instead indicated that there was indeed a struggle. However, none of this was addressed in the initial review, as the lead detective simply accepted Donovan's account and classified the case as a self-inflicted incident. Furious, Jamie filed a formal complaint with the Community Oversight Board and began using TikTok to push for answers in her daughter's case. But as her post gained attention, Donovan's attorney sought to stop her from speaking publicly, and the court granted a gag order, a restriction preventing her from discussing the case online. But even then, she continued posting, covering her mouth with a tape marked with the words "Justice for April." And as Jamie continued reviewing the case materials, she would eventually come across a detail that shifted the direction of everything. Jamie noticed that there was actual fingerprints found on the sticky side of the duct tape used to secure the plastic bag around April's head, and those prints matched Donovan, not April. And so in June of 2024, nearly a year after April's death, Jamie texted Donovan a screenshot of the fingerprint evidence and gave him a choice: "You can tell me the truth, or I'm going to the cold case unit." And so Donovan panicked and called her, and because Tennessee is a one-party consent state, which means that she could legally document the conversation, Jamie pressed record. And over the next 47 minutes, Donovan began sharing details that supported what Jamie had suspected all along. During the call, Donovan stated that on the morning of July 28th, he and April were having intercourse when he put his hands around her neck and continued applying pressure until she stopped breathing, and then he panicked. Once Donovan realized that April was no longer breathing, he moved her into the shower and placed a plastic bag over her head before securing it with tape. He then left the bathroom and went into the kitchen, prepared lunch for their 7-year-old son, Denzel, and helped him get ready for the day, all while April remained in the nearby shower. A short time later, he directed Denzel toward the bathroom, and this was when their son discovered his mom lying on the ground unconscious. However, considering the actual timeline of events, this story doesn't make any sense either. Jamie actually later explained that 3 days before the incident, April confided in her how she was being taken advantage of by a client she was assisting through her interior design sideline work, and how she had to seek medical care afterwards. And so April was still recovering at the time of the incident, and so it doesn't seem plausible that she would engage in intercourse with Donovan right after this incident. But once Jamie got the confession she wanted, she immediately took the recorded call to the police, and with both the audio and the physical evidence she previously identified, investigators decided to reopen the case. Now in September of 2024, Donovan Holt was arrested in Texas, and for Jamie, the arrest finally marked the moment she'd been looking forward to, and she pushed for a first-degree murder charge. But in February of 2025, a plea deal was struck. Instead of facing a jury for murder, Donovan pleaded guilty to lesser charges, which was reckless homicide, evidence tampering, and false reporting. He would ultimately be handed a 10-year sentence, but according to the judge's ruling, he will only serve 2 years in prison, with the remaining 8 carried out through community corrections, which functions similarly to supervised probation. Not surprisingly, Jamie was extremely frustrated with the outcome, since Donovan got away with the least amount of punishment possible. So now she channels her grief into the fight against domestic violence, and even opened a non-profit called Grieve With Me in April's honor. And while Donovan failed to hide his crimes in the face of justice, this next influencer turned their crimes into their public persona to gain a profit.
The charges include administering poison with intent to harm, preparation to commit crimes with dangerous things, torture, making child exploitation material, and fraud.
Alana Harris is an Australian influencer from Queensland who built her TikTok career around the chaotic, wholesome life of raising her 4 children. Her online presence grew significantly after she shared a personal tragedy from her past, opening up about the loss of her daughter, Lily, years prior. This disclosure drew a large wave of attention and support as viewers connected with her story and offered her sympathy for her loss. Over time, her content would shift towards documenting her children's medical challenges, placing her account within a corner of TikTok where stories about illness often receive increased engagement. And as she leaned further into this type of content, she began posting more frequently on the platform. And when her youngest daughter, Daisy, started getting sick, her online activity increased significantly. During this period, Alana would document every single hospital visit, sharing the most vulnerable and invasive moments of suffering. She would film her daughter unconscious, zooming in on the medical equipment, and she would also post videos of Daisy having seizures, as well as clips of her in a hospital bed, looking lethargic and pale, with tubes coming out of her nose. She told her audience that Daisy was fighting for her life, and that the doctors diagnosed her daughter with epilepsy, infantile spasms, a rare and severe type of seizure seen in babies, and tuberous sclerosis complex, a rare genetic disorder that causes tumors to grow in different organs of the body, especially the brain.
Diagnosed on Friday with epilepsy, Sunday with infantile spasms, and then Thursday with tuberous sclerosis complex.
And as days passed, her descriptions of Daisy's conditions grew more elaborate. Even a GoFundMe campaign was launched, ultimately raising an estimated 60,000 Australian dollars, which is around 40,000 US dollars. And with viewers being emotionally invested and financially contributing, the situation became even more serious, as the medical episodes just increased in frequency. In one video, Alana provided an update about Daisy's seizures.
Daisy is now having seizures that last anywhere from an hour to 2.5 hours at a time, and she's having more than one of these a day.
She stated that the episodes last between 1 hour and 2.5 hours, a time frame that would typically indicate a critical emergency requiring immediate intervention. But instead of seeking medical help, she would instead focus on making content for her TikTok page. In another clip, Alana explained that Daisy's brain was covered with tumors, and as these kinds of posts circulated, Alana's videos would eventually reach the staff at Queensland's Children's Hospital, the same nurses and doctors who were treating Daisy. They immediately noticed that much of what Alana described didn't match Daisy's actual medical condition. She claimed that Daisy was in palliative palliative care when she actually wasn't, referencing tumors that imaging never actually showed, and describing seizure activity that didn't actually align with what the hospital staff had observed or recorded. In an attempt to locate the issues Alana insisted were present, doctors had to perform 2 exploratory brain surgeries in which Daisy's skull was opened on 2 different separate occasions, yet no actual tumors or structural problems were ever found. With no medical explanation for Daisy's symptoms in those videos, the medical team decided to run toxicology tests, and when the results came out, it was revealed that Daisy's blood contained significant amounts of benzodiazepines, especially Valium. This sedative is generally used for adults and can cause drowsiness, unsteadiness, and neurological symptoms. When taken in high dose, symptoms similar to those seen in Alana's videos. And once the results were confirmed, the hospital contacted the police and Child Protective Services, which immediately triggered a formal investigation, and so authorities began gathering evidence surrounding Daisy's unexplained symptoms. And as the case progressed, police determined that there was sufficient evidence to move forward, and Alana was formally charged. Investigators alleged that Alana administered these medications without medical authorization, creating symptoms that actually required hospitalization. And following the investigation, authorities charged her with 5 counts of administering poison with intent to harm, 3 counts of preparing to commit crimes involving dangerous substances, and 1 count each of torture, making small human exploitation material, and fraud. And as the case became public, Alana's online presence collapsed. Her TikTok account, which had over 1.1 million followers, disappeared, and the GoFundMe page was removed. And this was also the time when Alana's husband, Brock, suddenly decided to break his silence by posting a statement on Snapchat in an attempt to clear his name.
For what it's worth, I had no idea about what Alana was doing. I pushed for those surgeries because in my heart I felt like it would help, and didn't realize that she was being drugged the entire time, causing her systems to be what they are.
He also addressed the investigation and his own guilt, admitting,
I should have done better for them. I'm sorry I couldn't protect Daisy the way I should have.
And he would end the message by calling her out directly.
Alana, you're an absolute monster. You win.
Following his statement, authorities decided to remove their 3 children, including Daisy, from the home and placed into foster care. And once Daisy was no longer under Alana's supervision and the medication was no longer present in her system, her condition actually changed dramatically. The seizures dropped and the reported tumors were no longer mentioned in her medical assessment. And Daisy actually began sitting up, eating, and behaving like a healthy. In a brief audio clip released after the allegation surfaced, Alana's asked directly if she harmed her daughter, and she refused to answer, simply saying,
I can't talk to you. This is a matter that cannot be spoken of,
before claiming that she'll get a lawyer to contact them.
Did you harm your daughter?
No, I can't talk to you, Bailey. That's why I've talked to you. I've said this is a matter that cannot be spoken on.
As of now, the case still remains in court, and the children remain in protective placement while the authorities decide their mother's punishment. But while Daisy was rescued just in time and made a full recovery, what comes next begins with the small human who never got a chance.
The medical experts talk about when she became unwell, that would be consistent with explaining some of those injuries that she has to her chest and abdomen area and making her feel unwell and sick.
It's August 8, 2020. CCTV footage from inside an elevator in an apartment complex in Solihull, England records a brief interaction between a mother and her daughter. The child in the video is Kaylee, moving around the small place with carefree energy. She reaches toward her mother repeatedly, glancing upwards in hopes of catching her attention. Her mother, 23-year-old Nikki Priest, remains focused on her reflection in the elevator mirror, and throughout the ride, she doesn't look down at Kaylee or responds to her movements. And unfortunately, this footage is the last time Kaylee is seen alive. Later that night, Kaylee would be found unalived in a bedroom she shared with her mother, and the circumstances surrounding her death were quite sketchy, leading investigators to examine the environment inside flat 14 or Stonebridge Crescent, where she spent her final months. And while the inside of that apartment revealed one reality, the version of Nikki that existed online told a completely different story. Online, Nikki crafted the image of a young mother enjoying her life, filling her TikTok feeds with selfies, dancing videos, and upbeat content that suggested a carefree lifestyle. However, the conditions inside the apartment stood in stark contrast to the cheerful persona she displayed on social media. Kaylee's bedroom contained only bare floorboards and a thin, stained piece of foam serving as a mattress, and neighbors later described hearing frequent shouting coming from the flat. Phrases such as
shut up, go away,
or
leave me alone
were reported multiple times. In addition, one neighbor also recalled hearing a loud thud on the floor, followed immediately by blaring music, which left them unsettled about what might have happened inside the apartment. This pattern of concerning behavior would continue until May of 2020, when Nikki began a relationship with a 22-year-old man named Callum. Their relationship developed quickly, and Nikki's focus appeared to shift almost entirely toward Callum, and despite relying on government benefits, she withdrew £1,000, roughly $1,400 to buy him a BMW. And for some reasons, Callum had issues with Kaylee, and he didn't try to hide it. On July 24th, just weeks before Kaylee's death, investigators uncovered a disturbing text exchange between Nikki and Callum. In the message, Nikki wrote,
I'm gonna end her because she keeps leaving the living room or going in the kitchen. So I've paled, hit her, one, and smacked her for defecating on her nappy.
And Callum responded by saying,
good, give her one from me. I will, babe.
This would set the stage for the events that unfolded on August 8th. On this fateful day, Nikki and Kaylee started out by spending their time at the park before returning to their flat. When they got home, Callum was hanging out with one of his friends, Matthew Alport, who would later later provide an invaluable testimony about the scenes that followed. A couple of moments later, Kaylee was eating a frozen meal at the small table, dressed in pink pajamas. Meanwhile, the adults were spending time on the balcony. As the night progressed, Nikki and Callum decided to spend more time alone, but Kaylee, still energetic, kept walking around the flat, wanting to play. Eventually, Callum would bring her to the bedroom to try to calm her down. But once she went in, Matthew, who was in the living room, started hearing muffled voices through the door. A short while later, Nikki went in as well, and when the two of them finally returned to the living room, Kaylee started shaking the stair gate at the doorway, and the rattling went on for several minutes before everything suddenly went quiet. Sometime later, Callum went back into the bedroom and called out for Nikki that Kaylee was sick. Nikki went in immediately, and according to what she later told investigators, this was the first time she noticed Kaylee was vomiting. But instead of contacting emergency services, Nikki and Callum cleaned the child, changed the bedding, and placed her back into the room alone. And it wasn't long after that before Matthew would stand up to leave. He recalls that Callum's demeanor shifted abruptly, as if he wanted him out of the flat. And just before Matthew walked out, Callum leaned over the stairgate and said goodbye into the room, but there wasn't a response from Kaylee. After leaving, he continued communicating with Nikki through text messages. At around 11:17 p.m, Nikki then texted him stating that Kaylee was still sick. Now the next morning on August 9th, Nikki walked into Kaylee's room at around 11 a.m. It had been roughly 12 hours since she last checked on Kaylee the night before, but what she found was Kaylee unresponsive and cold to the touch, prompting her to immediately dial 999. By the time paramedics arrived, they found clear indications that Kaylee had been passed away for several hours, as she was already in full rigor mortis. Her lips were purple and her body temperature was low, and while preparing to attach medical pads on her remains, the responders cut open her pajama top only to discover extensive bruising on her chest. In addition, there were also multiple clusters of bruises on her torso. Kaylee's injuries immediately raised concern among the first responders, and the case was quickly escalated to a homicide investigation. But while the authorities were still trying to figure out what really happened to Kaylee, Nikki would actually turn her social media activity all the way up. Rather than withdrawing from online platforms, she went straight back to TikTok and started posting tribute videos, uploading montages of Kaylee with captions like
"RIP my baby" and "Mommy will never forget you."
But within a matter of weeks, the tribute posts stopped appearing, and Nikki slowly resumed uploading her usual content, which was dancing videos, outfit clips, and makeup updates. But all that would come to an abrupt end once Nikki and Callum were placed under arrest and charged for Kaylee's murder. By June 2021, the case had proceeded to court, and this is when medical examiners were able to reveal the autopsy results, and what it confirmed was rather disturbing. Apparently, Kaylee had suffered severe chest and abdominal trauma, as well as broken ribs, fractures to both lower legs, and a fractured sternum. According to experts, the force required to cause these injuries was equivalent to being hit by a car traveling at 40 miles per hour, or falling from a third-story window onto concrete. It was also confirmed that the vomiting response was solely caused by internal trauma, consistent with the injuries identified. And when called to the stand, Nikki and Callum would blame each other for the fatal injuries. In Nikki's defense, she claimed that she was outside smoking at the time, and that she returned to find Kaylee unwell. As for Callum, he actually admitted to having hit Kaylee earlier in that evening, but denied causing the injuries that led to her actual death. But the prosecutors argued that the pair acted together, and that the reason Kaylee became a target was because she decided to stay awake at the time when Nikki and Callum wanted privacy. However, due to the lack of forensic evidence identifying the exact moment when the injuries were inflicted, the jury couldn't determine which of them delivered the final blow, and so as a result, both defendants were actually acquitted of the murder of Kaylee, and instead were convicted of manslaughter. Nikki would also get an additional conviction for being cruel to a small human. At the end of the trial, Nikki would receive a 15-year sentence, while Callum was sentenced to 14 years behind bars. And while Nikki's actions were obvious to those around her, the next case involves a mother whose public image concealed a much more troubling reality.
Like, it was heartbreaking to hear your year-old crying and saying, "I just don't want it to be canceled."
It was April 2025 when 34-year-old Emily Long from Madbury, New Hampshire first started posting videos online. She wasn't an influencer and didn't appear to be building a public platform. Instead, she framed the uploads as a way of documenting what her family was going through.
We just started the diagnosis process last week with my husband's craniotomy. We have 3 young kids who are...
In these early posts, Emily explains that her 48-year-old husband, Ryan Long, has been diagnosed with glioblastoma, an excessive form of brain cancer, and viewers followed along, offering support to a woman who looked like she was attempting to manage an overwhelming situation. And to those watching, the Long family appeared close and stable. Ryan worked as a school psychologist in the Oyster River Cooperative School District, a role centered on supporting children through trauma and emotional distress. And Emily, known for a quick wit and sense of humor, appeared to complement his personality. During this period, Emily would post frequent updates about the impact of the medical situation on their household, especially on their 3-year-old Parker, 6-year-old Ryan, and the 8-year-old son whose name isn't publicly available. She described how the diagnosis affected each child, recalling how Parker immediately reacted to seeing his father's shaved head. And while these videos generated widespread sympathy, events outside of Emily's online presence began moving in a different direction. At the time, Emily was the director of operations for Wingits, a regional chicken wing restaurant chain, and somewhere along the line, her employer, Derek Fisher, would begin noticing inconsistencies in the company's financial records.
Noticed that there was a lot of handwritten checks in her name personally that were being deposited into her bank account.
Cash deposits expected to appear in the business account were missing, and further review would reveal handwritten checks being routed into Emily's personal bank account. According to Derek, the pattern dates back to January 2023, long before Ryan's medical diagnosis, and by the end of his internal audit, the total amount missing exceeded $660,000. As Derek thought back on their earlier conversations, he remembered the offhand comments Emily had made about struggling with her spending and staying on top of budgeting, and the growing discrepancies prompted him to schedule a meeting with her for August 11th, as he began planning to involve law enforcement. And the most shocking part was that this isn't even the first time she would be accused of something like this. Back in 2016, years before she moved to New Hampshire, authorities in Massachusetts investigated her for stealing from a brew pub where she worked. According to that report, she and her boyfriend at the time took about $11,000 in cash, as well as some alcohol, before hopping on a plane to Thailand for a vacation. She eventually came back and faced charges, but the case would actually later be dismissed because the pub went out of business in the meantime. By August 2025, Ryan had completed his first round of radiation treatment, and Emily would continue posting about the emotional strain of caregiving and would express her fear about the future. Among these updates, she explained that she feels as though she's coming apart, and the viewers interpreted the comment as a reference to the ongoing cancer battle. But in reality, her employer had actually confronted her about the missing funds and had scheduled a meeting with her for August 11th. When the day came, Emily didn't attend the meeting, and on Saturday, August 16th, she would post one last video. In the video, she talked about getting dressed, visiting neighbors, and beginning to make changes in her life. She also mentioned her son and noted that he's been unusually upset, before the video ended with her saying she intends to have a fantastic day. But what happened next would catch everybody by surprise. On August 18th, 2025, Emily suddenly picked up her handgun and fired multiple shots at Ryan while he was sleeping. The two older children, Parker and Ryan, were also shot, each suffering a single gunshot wound to the head, and Emily would also do the same thing to herself. By the time the smoke cleared, only one child remained alive. Her youngest son was physically unharmed, and since all of the adults in the house had already lost their lives, police weren't actually called until approximately 8:20 p.m. that evening. The neighbors became concerned after not seeing the family all day. They immediately called the cops to report their suspicions, and shortly afterwards, the officers arrived to conduct a welfare check, and upon entering the house, they found the bodies of Emily, Ryan, Parker, alongside the surviving toddler. Because of Ryan's diagnosis, the general public initially believed that he may have been responsible. However, the medical examiner's report will later clarify the cause of death for each family member. Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Duval and the examining team determined that Ryan and the two older lost their lives by homicide, while Emily checked herself out of this world. Investigators found no note and no clear explanation for what happened inside the house, and they cautioned against assuming it was caused by a single stressor. The only certainty is that the toddler who survived is now in the care of relatives, while the rest of the family's story ends with unanswered questions. But while her crime was a sudden explosion of violence, this final case is a slow burn nightmare that lasted for a decade.
I hope you feel as scared in jail as we did living with you.
Only on 13, 6 of the children who were sexually abused by their adoptive father came face to face with him today in court.
It's early January 2017. A man named Hayim Cohen posted his very first YouTube video featuring his large, happy family, and his early videos quickly shaped a public image of a devoted family man. And within the Houston community, he becomes known for his generosity and involvement. He presents himself as a devout Orthodox Jewish rabbi, a selfless man who's dedicated his life to saving children that nobody else wanted. As part of his image, he would expand his household through multiple adoptions, eventually bringing in 9 boys from the foster care system into his care, several of whom have special needs. Hayim claimed that he was working as a social worker when he saw Jewish children stuck in the system with nowhere to go, and this is what motivated him to take them in. On TikTok, Hayim was known as a single father, battling a terminal illness, a mysterious condition he never actually named, yet he still found the strength to raise the boys in a loving religious home. Over time, his story would gain significant traction on social media. Gradually, his TikTok account, Our Unique Family, grew to more than 180,000 followers, who regularly watched clips of their household's routines. But as his online presence grew, certain details in his story began to shift. Parts of his identity, religious background, and even misclaimed illness didn't fully align with what he presented online. His legal history revealed that he was born under the name Jeffrey Lujan Vigil, a man who later legally changed his name and began living under the identity of Hayim Cohen. And the role he now played included wearing religious clothing, presenting himself as a rabbi, and fabricating a story rooted in New York, all just to gain credibility within the Jewish community. And his claims of a terminal illness would also later turn out to be manufactured as well, because even though he appeared in a wheelchair and used oxygen tanks in public, witnesses reported that he moved around without assistance inside the home. However, the list of lies was only a tiny fraction of the secret Hayim was hiding. Unknown to everyone, once the adoptions were finalized, the boys, once presented online as a close-knit family, began living under strict control. Hayim would reportedly limit their access to food, often restricting them to a single meal a day. He would also employ disciplinary practices. In addition to the maltreatment, several of the boys also recounted being instructed to visit his bedroom at night under the pretense of helping with foot massages, framed as a way to support his aching, sick body. But over time, the interactions evolved, with the boys being told they owed him gratitude for taking them in and providing a home. And this was how he began taking advantage of them intimately. For years, years, multiple of his sons reported experiencing repeated maltreatment, describing a pattern in which a dependence on him and the restriction placed on their daily lives left them with little ability to seek help or understand the extent of what was happening. Accounts from his sons also described being coerced into horrible actions involving one another. For some of the boys, the patterns of maltreatment began within weeks of their arrival in the household, and those with prior trauma from the foster system were especially vulnerable, often told that nobody else would accept them and that their circumstances in the home were the best they could expect. During this time, Chaim would also share the responsibility for enforcing rules and maintaining control within the house. The oldest adopted son, Avshalom, back then in his 20s, was reportedly involved in helping impose discipline and reinforcing the structure that kept the younger boys compliant. Rather than shielding them, Avshalom let the power get to his head, times using physical aggression and offering items such as energy drinks or vapes in exchange for silence. In 2019, the household dynamics then shifted further when a young foreign exchange student from Spain was placed in the house. Unlike the adopted boys, he'd not been subjected to the same long-term condition, and the interactions he experienced quickly raised concerns. And as he noticed the strange behavior, the student actually turned to school staff and disclosed what has been encouraged. This prompted an investigation, and authorities ultimately arrested Chaim on charge of indecency with a small human. Now, normally an arrest of this nature would trigger a broader review of the household and the safety of the children in his care. However, the intervention didn't actually occur. When the case got to court, Chaim emphasized that he was severely ill, appearing in a wheelchair with oxygen tanks and presenting symptoms that suggest significant medical decline. And since he didn't really look like a threat, Chaim was ultimately released on bond, and the life inside the home resumed as before. As a matter of fact, it deteriorated further during this period, as the boys understood that they might probably not get any help even if they exposed them to the public. But this would actually change on January 30th, 2023, when plans for an upcoming relocation were discussed inside the home. One of the sons later explained that Chaim had told him that he would be sent to Israel once he turned 18, a move that will place him out of reach of any chance to seek help or report what had been happened. And so with only days left before his birthday, the son obtained a prepaid phone, connected it to the household Wi-Fi, and contacted a podcast called Blind Skin Beauty. Yes, not the police, but a podcast.
Wyatt Paynes was put in an unexpected position at the end of last month when a teen boy called into her podcast reporting that he and his 8 brothers were being used by their adoptive father.
During the call, he began outlining what life inside the house actually looked like. He explained that it wasn't the first time outside agencies had been alerted. Over the years, 8 separate CPS investigations had been opened after concerns were raised about the boys' safeties. But each time, the cases were simply closed, because according to him, the younger were too afraid to speak, and the older ones were pressured or bribed into staying quiet. As a result, investigators never received enough information to understand what was truly happening behind closed doors. The podcast host, T. Payne, immediately alerted her team to contact law enforcement, who were eventually able to track the call to the residence in Houston. Officers were instantly dispatched to the house, and upon their arrival, Chaim was taken into custody, and the small humans were finally removed from the house for their safety. And when investigators searched their residence, they found a hospice care provider, which initially appeared to support Chaim's claims of terminal illness. However, after transporting him to a hospital after evaluation, doctors actually confirmed that he was medically stable and didn't require any equipment or care he'd been using publicly. Oxygen tanks, wheelchair, and hospice arrangements were later described by investigators as tools he used to reinforce his pitiable public image. And so by April 2025, the case was in court. Chaim, now 38, sat at the defense table as 6 of his adopted sons testified, detailing their experiences in the home.
I will sleep good tonight knowing you will never get out of jail. I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. You look like a psychopath, and that scares me. Now I can relax while you suffer.
In an attempt to receive a lighter sentence, Chaim pleaded guilty, but that didn't work, as the court would later hit him with a 40-year prison sentence. As for the oldest son, after leaving the household, records show he became involved in criminal activity too, including charges related to human smuggling and substance possession. And during a stop near the Mexican border, officers found 8 undocumented immigrants in his van, along with a smoke bomb, a counterfeit police badge, and a firearm fitted with a 15-round drum.